My name is Karolina Ziulkoski, and I'm Chief Curator of the YIVO Bruce and Francesca Cernia Slovin Online Museum. And today we are launching our first exhibition. The exhibition is called Beba Epstein, The Extraordinary Life of an Ordinary Girl. And before I get into the exhibition itself, I want to talk a little bit about the concept of the museum. So the idea of the museum is to cover everything that is in the YIVO archives, and that is a very daunting task in itself, because we are talking about 4 centuries of history of an entire civilization, and any possible topic you can imagine. So the first issue we had to deal with is how are we going to present so much history in a way that it's engaging and it doesn't seem all over the place. So what we did is we decided to follow personal stories. And why is that? Because through personal stories, you can learn a lot about many different subjects. So for example, when we are talking about Beba Epstein, her story is a vehicle for you to learn more about family life, schools, the Holocaust, of course, because she went through it, and several topics throughout the whole exhibition. And then you can see a lot of the richness of Jewish life in Eastern Europe from the end of the 1800s to the mid 1900s. And so what we did is, with this personal story, we follow her account, and then we bring together a lot of different artifacts, objects from the archives into a very compelling story, and then you understand the concept into which these artifacts exist and were created. The idea was that we are not going to focus on specific objects, but we are going to knit them all together and tell a cohesive story so that you understand why these objects are so important and why it's so relevant to keep them, store them, and maintain them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen now and go over the exhibition with you a little bit so you can understand a little bit more what I'm talking about and the concept and everything that you're going to find in there. All right, so this is the first page of the exhibition. So let me walk you through the structure here a little bit before we get into the content of the exhibition. So we have Beba's story, and then the story is divided into 10 chapters. So if you go in here, you're gonna have a table of contents. So as you can see, we have 10 chapters. Each one has a different topic. And then from there, you're gonna expand a little bit more from Beba's story. So we have the first chapter is going to be presenting Beba, who she is. The second one is about her family and the story of her family. The third one is about summer holidays. Then we have her primary education. We have the city of Vilna. She's from Vilna, and we have an exploration of the city of Vilna that she lived in. We have summer camps. We have a little bit of context of what was going on in the world at the time. The war, Second World War, her immigration process, and then she ended her life in the United States. Here you have an overview of everything that we have in here. So then let me go to the first chapter. All right, so you have the main part of the chapter is her personal account. So it's Beba telling her story. And then we always have here on the side a historical timeline, which is to show you where we are in world history at the time. So we have some main world events here so that you know, okay, the year she was born, what was going on, what is going on when this chapter is taking place. And then, and this is probably the 2 most important parts, we have a selection of artifacts and a selection of maps. So the selection of artifacts and the maps, they give you a broad context of what was going on. So the artifacts, they do not always relate to Beba's story, but they relate to the topic that we are talking about in here. So for example, let me go through the first chapter. This chapter is very short, and it's Beba presenting herself and saying, you know, what she likes, what she doesn't like, and all this information came from her autobiography. So her autobiography has a very interesting story in itself because it was found with all the artifacts that were encountered in 2017 in Lithuania. They had been hidden for 70 years, I believe, by a librarian and were just recently uncovered. So this is very recent. And the autobiography was written in the 1933-34 school year as part of a contest that YIVO held for teenagers to talk about their story and archive their stories. So this is just her talking about her traits. So we have, this is Beba. So this is a picture of her, and this picture was in her autobiography. And it's probably one of the very few pictures of her at this age that was not destroyed in the Holocaust. And then there are some episodes, like, for example, this first episode, she said when she was 2 years old, she broke all the china in the china cabinet. And then she talks about how she torn apart her cousin's best-in-class geography paper, which might not be a big deal nowadays, but at the time it was. And then how her grandfather, who was super religious, told her that she should behave like a good religious girl, otherwise God would spank her with iron hot, so she would hide from God. And then she used to tell lies and tease and tell on people, but now she doesn't do this anymore. And this is a class picture where we can see both Beba and her sister Asia. And she talks about how she can't stand seeing animals being hurt. And this is a selection of many pictures from the archives featuring animals. And how she loves sports. And then we made a little selection of sports-related pictures from the archives. And she loved to read, but preferred to read in Yiddish as opposed to Polish, which she also spoke. This is a book in Yiddish from our archives, and that her mom thought she was really stubborn. This is also an account she made when her mom said that she should wear a warm coat because it was snowing, but she felt super warm and she wanted to wear a summer dress. So then you have an idea of what this chapter is about. And when you go into the artifacts, then we have, well, her actual autobiography, which we based a lot of the content of the exhibition on. And we also have a full translation to English, but we also have a selection of other autobiographies that kids sent to the YIVO contest. So this is one of them, for example. And all of them we have, if not a full translation, at least a summary. So then we expand into other experiences that children had at the time. And then if we go into the map section, it's those are maps to help you situate where you were in geography, because at the time in Eastern Europe, there were so many border changes that we thought it was important to always keep you abreast of where people were. So then we have here, for example, a map of Poland in 1922 and where Vilna was. And then we have a map today where Vilnius is actually the capital of Lithuania, not part of Poland anymore. So now I'm going to go into chapter 2, which is a very special chapter where we talk about her family. So in her autobiography, if you read it from the artifacts in the first chapter, you're going to see that she talks a lot about her family. And then here we made animations from the account she made of each of her set of grandparents, her parents, and her siblings. So if you're going to see here the timeline, it's around the time that their grandparents were born, and then the time that their parents were born, and then when she and her siblings were born. So the animations, they you probably will not be able to hear the sound, but you can
meet my dad's parents,
explore it later.
Beba Epstein and Chaya Karna. Zeta.
But it offers very interesting presentation of them. But then we talk into the animations, we talk into a lot of subjects that not everyone might know. So if you do not know the context of some expressions, for example, what was the Pale of Settlement, what was the Russian Revolution, what was World War I, then you can go into these context boxes here where you can learn more about the context. If you know already, you don't need to come here, but if you don't, then you can learn, well, what was the Pale of Settlement, for example. And then we have links to the YIVO encyclopedia throughout if you want to go deeper into the subject. So if you go in here, then we have a very deep article from the encyclopedia about the Pale of Settlement. So these contextual information, we are calling it context boxes, and they are available throughout the exhibition, everywhere, where there is some information that you might not know and you want to go deeper. And this is what is interesting. We made different levels of information, so you can go as deep as you want. So if you just want to go through her personal account, you're going to learn a lot. But if you want to learn even more, you can go into the context box and learn about the historical situation. Or if you want to then have a very broad overview, then you go into the artifacts. And then you learn about a broader overview of what we have in the archives that is related to this specific topic. So for example, we have a very interesting one here, which is a passport to permit travel outside the Pale of Settlements. So she talks about one of her grandmothers, how she really wanted to travel but was never able to do so. And then it got us thinking, but why is that? So there were restrictions for Jews to travel outside the Pale of Settlement. And then border changes, of course, that first she was born in the Russian Empire, in the Pale of Settlement inside the Russian Empire, but then borders changed and she wasn't in Russia anymore. She always wanted to go to Moscow, but was never able to. So here we have a passport that permits travel outside the Pale of Settlement, for example. And then we have, for example, we talk about anti-Semitism and during that period, then we have a testimony about anti-Semitic violence by Polish legionnaires from 1919. This was right after the end of World War I. And she talks about how her father went to a trade school in Russia. And then we have here the idea of a student at the ORT Jewish Vocational School in Vilna, Poland. So there are many, many, many interesting artifacts that illustrate and expand in the main topic of that chapter. And then here, for example, in the section on the maps, we show the Pale of Settlement, that we talk a lot about it, and then the cities where her grandparents were born, and then Jewish population in the Pale of Settlement according to the Russian census of 1897, and then the border changes right after World War I, where we have Poland, and then Vilna is part of now of Poland, and then the former Pale of Settlement boundary, so that you understand where all of this was happening and why, for example, her grandmother couldn't go to Moscow anymore as she wanted. And yeah, so this is the main structure, and there is a lot, so much content. You could spend easily 2.5 hours in here. But what is interesting about this is that you don't need to do it all at once because it's online. You can come back anytime you want. And before we go, I just want to show a little bit of some more really interesting things, artifacts that we have in here. So if we go to the primary school chapter, Beba went to a primary school called Sofia Gurevich School in Vilna, which was a Yiddish school, part of the Tzicho school system, which was supported by the Bund. And we have here a selection of notebooks. We have here this little animation, which is, she has this part in her autobiography where she talks about how her grandfather used to go to Itzkovitz bookstore and buy books for all the children so that they would just be able to come up to the bookstore and pick them up, because we thought that education was the most important thing. And then here you can select one of the notebooks. So if you select this one, this is going to be Beba's notebook, and follow her school journey. This is not exactly her notebook, of course, but we have the Sofia Gurevich archive at YIVO, and we made a selection of lessons that we could find, and we also know what they learned at school. So we made a little selection here, and this is because it's her notebook, it's very interactive. So we know they learned Yiddish, we know they learned Polish, we know they learned math, biology. She talks about how much she loved music. We know she had music lessons. She loved about her classical music, for example. We have it here as well. And then she talks about how her favorite part in school was when the teacher would do book readings. So we made a selection of books that were famous at the time. And we have actress Yelena Shimlenson reading them, playing Beba's teacher, Stefania Shabbat. And this particular one, for example, this is called Dr. Awit Hertz, and it was written in Russian. We have in our library the Yiddish version, and we had it translated to English so for her to read. But we also made a selection of other books. So a lot of people don't know, for example, that many books that are still famous today and that are not from a Yiddish writer or Russian writer was also very famous at the time. It was actually a very cosmopolitan city. So Tom Sawyer was a hit in Yiddish, for example, Robinson Crusoe as well. And we have some other selections that were written in Yiddish originally, for example, Yingot Single Plat by Money Leib, and it was illustrated by Olisitsky. Sorry, I think my internet is a bit slow. But these are all super interesting, and we made available also excerpts or the full book either in Yiddish, and the ones that we had translated, the translation to English as well. I think that Dr. Alec Hertz, it's the first translation in English available. And then if you go to other notebooks, you're gonna learn about other schools that children could study in. This is not Beba's notebook, but some other options for schools. And then those are all from our archives as well. And we made a little summary of what is in the pages in here so that you can see what children learned at school, in primary school at the time. So let me see, I think that this is it for a tour of the museum right now. Please take a look at the museum, take a little tour, and if you have any questions or comments, please leave it down here and we'll do our best to reply to them later. Thank you.